What is up? What is up? What is up, everybody? We are back for another video. It's your boy Pip, and this time we are talking about 10. That's it, count them. 10 things that they have never done with Money in the Bank before. I want to say not all of these are good things, but they're things that haven't happened either way. You might not want them to happen. I don't want them all to happen, but they haven't and they could, so we're going to talk about them. Let's start at number 10. Let's just hop right into it. I'll explain to you what I think about it. If I think it could go well, cool, whatever. Yeah. Um, so let's just dive right in, shall we? So, as Pip, I present to you 10 things Money in the Bank has never done yet. At number 10, cashing in for the Intercontinental or Tag Team or Women's Mid Card Championships. It could be done. We have precedent. Austin Theory cashed in for the U.S. Championship a few years ago and lost, but we don't have to talk about that. We don't have to talk about losing here. It's not important. But it's been done. So why can't it be done for those? Personally, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see it cashed in for the IC title. I don't want to see it cashed in for the women's mid card titles. I'd be mildly fascinated in seeing it cashed in for a tag title just to see how they do it. But overall, I think it should stick to world titles. Personally, I think that's for the best. But something that hasn't been done, even though I don't want to see it. Speaking of things I don't want to happen, but they haven't been done and they could. At number 9, we got a two-time women's Miss Money in the Bank winner. And I know some of you might be pulling out your calculators and calendars and saying, actually, Pep, if you remember the very first Money in the Bank, Carmella won, and then they made her redo it and win it again. So Carmella already won two Miss Money in the Bank ladder matches. Yeah, but according to their history, she's only a one-time Money in the Bank winner. I think it's because they made the first one null and void. It really doesn't matter because it was just story beat. They basically just made her defend it or redo the match. If you restart a match, then the first result didn't happen, so she really never won it in the first place. That was kind of the whole point. They said you didn't win this, so do it again, and she did. Um, so we don't have a two-time winner yet. I don't want one, but we could get one. Could be Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss is like the front runner to win Money in the Bank this year, according to most theories, and she's already won it once. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't want that, but if it's going to be somebody, Alexa Bliss could be, you know, a decent enough choice in my opinion. I like Alexa Bliss, and her character is very different than it was then, so at least it would feel fresh. Um, but not as fresh as something like this. At number 8, I got cashing in during a major multi man match. Now, I know some of you might be saying, Pep, what do you mean major multi man match? Why'd you say that so sophisticatedly? Because I can think of two prime examples. One being War Games, which a couple years ago it looked like we were going to get this when Priest almost cashed in on Rollins, but then didn't because Orton returned. Um, but what happens in that moment? What happens if Priest cashes in? Are all the people in the ring suddenly part of a WWE Championship match? Does it become a one-on-one match in the middle of everything? Um, and to that same question, what happens in an even bigger multi-man match like the Royal Rumble? We have multiple cases of precedence for the WWE Championship being on the line already in a Royal Rumble. Either A, because of 1992, Ric Flair challenging for the Undisputed Championship. Or not the Undisputed Championship, the WWE Championship that was vacant at the time. He succeeded in winning that vacant title. In 2016, Roman Reigns defended his WWE Championship in the Royal Rumble, eventually being the second to last person eliminated by Triple H, who then went on to win the match by eliminating Dean Ambrose right afterwards. But that was already for the title. But if you were Mr. Money in the Bank at the time, which that year would have been Sheamus, he had already cashed in at that point. But if he hadn't, could he have cashed in to add himself as a 31st entrant to the Royal Rumble? Or in the case of 2020, when Brock Lesnar went into the Royal Rumble as your WWE champion, started the match, made it all crazy and bonkers, that means the WWE champion was already in the match and the title wasn't on the line. Could Mr. Money in the Bank come out and cashed in and made it on the line? Could Brock Lesnar have lost his title without ever getting pinned, without ever being involved in a match that required a pin? Could we have done it after Lesnar was already eliminated and still made it a title match? How would that work? It's just a question. He's in the match. If he's already in the match and we've teased the idea of doing it during a War Games match, how will that work? How would that work in the Royal Rumble? Now, while we're talking about precedent because of men like Brock Lesnar, let's talk about a different Royal Rumble moment with Brock Lesnar and talk about at number 7, the idea of winning a world title without cashing in. In 2015, Brock Lesnar was your WWE champion and defended at the Royal Rumble in a triple threat match against John Cena and the, at the time, Mr. Money in the Bank, Seth Rollins. Rollins hadn't cashed in at WrestleMania yet, but he was in a title match. What if he won? Does he walk around with both? Does he just have a safety net? How does that work? The only way we find out is if it happens, right? Could. Now, while we're talking about cashing in like Seth Rollins, if you remember, Seth Rollins cashed in at WrestleMania 31 during the world title match between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins came out in the middle of that match, cashed in Money in the Bank, and it became a triple threat. So, at number 6, what if you do that during a non-title match? Cashing in during a non-title match. Picture this. It's a random episode of Friday Night SmackDown 2 weeks after SummerSlam. John Cena is still the WWE champion, but he has some unexpected drama to deal with. And so he has a match with an old rival, AJ Styles. But by then, we have Mr. Money in the Bank. If Money in the Bank comes out and cashes in during that match between AJ and John Cena, does the match end and we start with Cena versus Money in the Bank? Or is AJ Styles suddenly in a triple threat match for the WWE Championship? Could someone who is not the champion or the Money in the Bank holder walk out with the title after a cash-in? There's only one way to find out. Do it. Be interesting. Just saying. Now, let's talk about something other than the concept of cashing in. Let's talk about the concept of not cashing in. At number 5, what happens if you cash in, but your briefcase is empty? You got to remember, you're not competing for that briefcase. You're competing for what's inside that briefcase, which is a contract for a title match whenever, wherever. But people have changed the briefcase plenty of times. Doesn't matter what you're holding. It matters what's inside what you're holding. The contract. So what if your contract isn't in the briefcase when you cash in? Is that a get out of jail free card? If you lose, you didn't actually lose because you didn't turn in the contract? If you win, does it get revoked because you didn't actually turn in the contract? It's a heel thing to do. It's not a face thing to do. It could be a heel thing to do for a heel to take it out of the briefcase without the face knowing. But again, it's a matter of doing it. Now, we talked about cashing in on multi-man like big multi-man matches. We talked about cashing in during non-title matches. But what about cashing in on champion versus champion matches? I think that's a good number 4. At number 4, cashing in on champion versus champion matches. Survivor Series for several years. Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan. Brock Lesnar versus AJ Styles. Last year at Crown Jewel, Gunther versus Cody Rhodes. If you cash in Money in the Bank during that match, Tiffany Stratton could have cashed in during Nia Jax versus Liv Morgan. Do you win both? Do you only win one? Do you pick which one? If it's during the Crown Jewel Championship, do you win all 3? Be kind of crazy. Walk in with a briefcase, walk out with 3 titles. Why not experiment with something like that? It'd be so cool. It would be historic. Almost as historic as if at number 3, you cashed in on a different company's world title. You knew it had to be on here. The partnership with TNA is thriving. NXT champion Oba Femi's been on TNA multiple times. TNA champions Joe Hendry and Moose have been on TNA or on NXT multiple times. Joe Hendry was at WrestleMania. Hell, imagine this. Imagine AJ Styles wins Money in the Bank and then cashes in on the TNA champion. The story. Hell, better than that. Imagine if Drew McIntyre didn't waste the Money in the Bank briefcase and he had cashed in at WrestleMania on Joe Hendry. Drew McIntyre would be a multi-time TNA champion. He would have won the TNA title at WrestleMania with Money in the Bank. Traffic for both companies would be through the roof. But instead we had him, lose on the same day. So, yeah. Now, let's get into my big 2. Oh, and for the record, I just want to say, by other company, I do mean TNA, but I also mean NXT. We had a Royal Rumble winner, Charlotte, choose the NXT Women's Championship. We could do the same thing with Money in the Bank. I digress. At number 2, something I've always fantasy booked, waiting the full year. What happens if you don't cash in? Do you lose it after a year? Do you have to defend it at next year's Money in the Bank ladder match? Or could you have a situation where if Money in the Bank this year was on June 7th, but next year it was on June 4th, could you have a situation where for 3 days there are 2 Mr. Money in the Banks? If you do that, you could have a fascinating story. Have a heel champion, a heel Money in the Bank. They go away for a few months. You have a new Money in the Bank winner who's a face, cashes in that night. Everybody moans and groans because it's another same night cash in. The face champion, the face challenger wins the title, and then you have the person from last year on day 362 cash in Money in the Bank and rip it away. Cashing in on a cash in. It'd be brilliant. Right now, our longest run with Money in the Bank is 287 days for Carmelo. We talked about it earlier. We also talked about Priest. He's our longest reigning Mr. Money in the Bank at 281. Both of them about 70 days or 2.5 months short of making it the full year. What happens if they had held on? And finally, at number one, something I think would be really, really good for Money in the Bank, a non-main roster winner. I think Money in the Bank should be including NXT. I think that if we're gonna stick with this, anywhere from 6 to 8 dynamic, it seems like it's really 6 is a really common number now. 2 from Raw, 2 from SmackDown, 2 from NXT. Done. You have an NXT winner. Everybody's going to assume they're going to cash in for the NXT Championship. Imagine if the NXT winner, somebody like Trick Williams, somebody like Oba Femi, somebody like Wes Lee. If you watch my video from last week, we talked about Wes Lee and how he'd be great for Money in the Bank. What if one of them wins Money in the Bank, stays on NXT, and then in 6 or 8 months shows up on an episode of Raw and cashes in on Jey Uso? Shows up on the last show of the year for John Cena and cashes in on John Cena. Out of sight, out of mind. Brilliant booking. So those are my 10. Those are my 10 best things, craziest things, strangest things, however you want to put it, that haven't been done yet with Money in the Bank. Let me know what I missed. Let me know what you guys think about these, which ones you'd like to see, which ones you'd hate to see. And let me know anything else that you can think of that hasn't been done with Money in the Bank that could at least be somewhat interesting. Also, keep an eye out for tomorrow, where we will upload our predictions for NXT Battleground, which will be taking place later tomorrow evening. And we will also be uploading a second video, which will be a little bit shorter, but we'll also talk about Money in the Bank because, like I said last weekend, I do want to talk about Money in the Bank every weekend until Money in the Bank. It is one of my favorites. With that being said, you could also go check out last week's videos where we talked about 10 potentially great winners for the men's Money in the Bank and the women's Money in the Bank in 2 separate videos. That is enough of me plugging my channel. Thank you guys for hanging out with this video. With all that being said, as always, I'm Pip, y'all the greatest, and when in doubt, we'll see you next time. See ya!